And then we were in air again. In the air. Falling and tumbling into a great open space. Glory slipped from my grasp as her wing beat instinctively and with futility. We were in a great shaft of tumbling water from a dozen of drains. Over and over I flipped in the grip of gravity till I landed with a great frothy crash at the bottom of the shaft. A cascade of water poured down atop me, and I became aware that the water was moving in a circle around the bottom of the shaft. There was a terrible force pulling me downward. "Glory!" I shouted, looking around as I instinctively flailed my limbs to keep me up. There was so much noise that I could barely hear myself. Then, in a green flash, in the darkness at the edge I saw a rusted stair. She clutched it, breathing hard. Her mouth moved as I swirled around and around. There was that noise, that horrible noise I'd heard in the fallen towers. It was deeper, though, and beneath me. And as I spun, I became aware that this water wasn't flat. It had a depression in the middle. A depression I was slowly sinking into. Did I mention that there wasn't a swimming pool in 99? Oh, and that I was wearing combat armor. And that I had 4 surprisingly heavy leg braces on. I swam like I had an orange pony bellowing in my ear to keep moving. Be strong, be tough, don't let this stop me. I couldn't let this stop me. I could hear grinding below me, and I imagined a pump with great chopped blades to break up garbage piled through it. I wasn't making any headway, but I wasn't getting pulled further. Then I was hit in the face by a wing of wet feathers. I couldn't grab it, so I bit. She had all 4 legs gripping the rail as tightly as she could as she pulled. The stair was jerking as the force started to pull bits of it free. I was going to get us both killed. And just like that, I knew what it meant to be holding on to a limb. Just what had gone through her mind. What I'd do to her if I let go and allow myself to be pulled into that watery maw. I saw her wide, terrified eyes, her lips moving. Don't let go. I don't want you to die, Glory. Just like she didn't want me to die in Flash Industries. But she'd had a whole life before her. I only had a few months. I knew she couldn't see me in the dark gloom. I wanted to let her know it would be all right. It would be okay. It would. And then she was firing her beam rifles at the stairs. What was she doing? With a metal shriek, an entire section of stair fell free, dropping both of us into the churning water. Why? I wanted to ask. But then I wasn't a smart pony. From beneath us came a resounding clang as the rusty lengths were fed into the grinder. There was an ear-splitting squeal as something beneath us exploded, and the water started to churn furiously. We embraced in the middle of the raging flow as the suction abruptly stopped. Spinning around and around, we held each other in the middle of the shaft. That shaft was rapidly filling with water. Up and up we were carried. As it filled, I could see the domed top, the open pipe. It looked really small, barely enough room for a pony. The noise rose higher, and she took a deep breath as she ducked down. With a whoosh, I was pushed into the pipe. Up and up, and up and up and up, and the pressure built more and more. I took a breath and held it. There was a metallic explosion, and, like that, I was once more in the air. I tumbled end over end, for a moment, in the jet of water before I finally slipped off and landed on my back. Glory flopped down next to me, coughing and hacking up water. The end of her rifle snapped in a sharp L shape. I had no idea how she was supposed to fix it now. I looked up at the gray clouds, and did the only thing appropriate for a moment like this. I started laughing, my fool head off right there in the middle of the pitted street. And an old buck chuckled. Well, damn. Don't you two just know how to make an entrance? Contrary to what some may believe, travel by pipe, while fast, is neither comfortable nor safe. In a few minutes we'd traveled nearly a mile west and popped out right next to a battered but intact fire station. From the second floor I could see a glimpse of the naval base and harbor to the north. Downstairs, next to the rusting fire pump wagons, the old buck's Brahmin were warming up and taking a load off of their powerful frames. A filly was feeding them piles of yellowed grass and thorny bushes. Brahmin could apparently eat anything, no matter how radioactive or poisoned, while a sour-looking mare scrapped away shovelfuls of their reeking dung. The old stallion in charge of the caravan was a wrinkled yellow earth pony buck with a gray mane. He wore a nice brown canvas coat and a floppy wide-brim hat, and he'd braided his mane, tail, and bushy garlic bulb of a beard and decorated them with shiny pieces of foil. I was rather astonished to see a pip buck on his right foreleg. His bright, shining blue eyes sparkled despite his age. Something about the way he grinned made me blush. Keeper, as he called himself, had picked us off the street and hauled us into the firehouse as the manticores wheeled around where we disappeared a mile or so to the east. His ghoul bodyguards, Charon and Cerberus, hadn't said a word as they trod along in their black combat armor and machine-gun-armed battle saddles. Unfriendly, unconcerned, or unable, I didn't know, and I wasn't sure how to broach the topic. Fortunately, with us relaxing in the old fire station's bunkhouse, Keeper was more than happy to talk enough for 3 ponies. Never seen the like of it. Ground rumbling and shaking into a split of 2, and from it issued not just a fountain, but 2 of the greatest beauties I could ever have imagined. I confessed I could tell this story to every pony I met for the rest of my days, and they'd never believe it, he said as he slapped a hoof on his knee. I had to admit I didn't feel very beautiful. My barding was thrashed and waterlogged, my leg braces were bent, and I was missing a patch of skin along the left side of my face where I'd brushed against the side of the pipe. Glory was even worse off. Her legs and rump looked as if they'd been sanded raw. Well, we're really glad you carried us out of there, Keeper, I said. Glory kept her eyes on her beam weapon, the snapped barrel bringing tears to her eyes as she tried to figure out how best to repair it. Thank Char and Serb. If they hadn't been willing to carry you, I don't think my old bones could have gotten very far. He looked over at Glory. If you're looking for an AER-10, I'm pretty sure that Mega Mart would be a good place to start. Bottle Cap keeps a pretty nice stock of weapons, even with all her troubles. Glory looked up and blinked. Oh, well, I might be able to convert it. The emerald's still intact, but the internals probably wouldn't fit on a 10's frame without major modification, and Megamart's out of our way anyway. She looked at him speculatively. Do you know about magic weapons? Oh, well, enough to get me into trouble, but not enough to be dangerous, he said enigmatically, and she flushed. I rubbed my missing eye with a wince as the dull throbbed in my head and leg. I must have bagged myself up pretty good. How about an AER-20? He asked with a grin. But that's a Gatling beam frame. So, make it into a Gatling beam weapon, Keeper chuckled. It just so happens I have an AER-20 that I swapped at the air station for 3 or 4 cartons of rosenberries. Can you imagine that? He said with a little wink. Might be worth considering. I can let you have it for, say, 800? 1,200, she countered at once. He chuckled and then reached into his bag for a little plastic box. He pulled off the lid. Well, now that's a fair offer. I might have to mull it over one spell. He deftly shook a little purple berry into his hoof and popped it into his mouth. He chewed with delight, smacking his lips. Not bad, not bad. He lifted the box. Gotta try one. Glory frowned, but then held out her hoof. He shook one, but 3 into it. She looked skeptical, but popped one in. Instantly, her eyes shot wide, and the second one followed the first into her mouth. Oh, wow. She groaned with a shiver. What? What's it taste like? I asked, lifting the last one from her hoof with my magic. The red Pegasus lunged, snapping the berry out of the air and munching furiously. My berry, she said firmly. I get the berries. I was one who was shoved into a pipe. I was saving us from getting chomped by manticores, I objected. I got shoved in a pipe. I get the berries, she replied firmly. Well, if you like 'em so much, the buck said. How about 1,800 and I throw in the berries, some scrap electronics, and some gem power cells for the weapon? Deal, gimme! She lunged for the container, and he held it out for her to snatch away. Holding it in her mouth, she trod away and began to munch them one after another, with a blissful look on her face. Suddenly, the earlier comment about them being a controlled substance didn't seem so ridiculous. I counted out the caps, and Keeper just chuckled. She's lucky. Awesome might sell a dozen cases a year, tops. Fortunately, I got connections with connections. Always nice to find a mare who admires quality food. I guess, I said, as my lovely mare friend made rather post-chordal noises as she lay on one of the bunks and devoured the berries one after one. Got any shotguns? I asked with a grin. I got an IF-80 and an IF-84, Stampede riot gun, he replied. 12 gauge. Of course. I rubbed my chin. How about an IF-88? I tapped my hooves, wondering if it might be possible. The Iron Pony? He nodded. I nodded vigorously, and he gave a soft sigh. Sorry, kid. Never put in production. He shook his head. It'd be worth its weight in... I'm not sure what it would be if you ever found one. As if I'd ever sell such a piece of beauty, I said, pinning over a gun I'd only seen once. For all I knew, it kicked like an orgasmic mule and jammed like a virgin on... Oh, goddesses. Was I feeling the itch again already? What are the odds I could get more of those berries? I asked as I looked at the lovely berry fiend. Good luck, he replied with a chuckle. Fact is, a few more days and those would have been spoiled, so he gave a shrug as he took his caps and carefully measured them out in stacks to count them. He looked at me and then at her. What? I asked with a small smile. I had seen that look on Mom, vaguely disapproving but with a hint of amusement. Just mourning on behalf of all masculine ponykind for the loss of fine femininity such as yourself, he said with a rueful chuckle. But I know love when I see it. Don't try to poach that sort of thing. You mean you and me? He sputtered, then flushed at his easy smile. You just met me. It was impossible. He was old, and in very good shape for his age. Well, I like to think myself an adventurous optimistic. If I lose, then I'm out nothing but a few bruises to my ego, and if I'm right... He gave a shrug and a look that had my ears flaming. But I can tell you do have been through a bit too much for the usual games. Gloria returned and offered me a small corner of the purple berries, looking a touch ashamed. You look familiar, Keeper, but I'm fairly sure we've never met, she said as I tried a berry. Then, with no further hesitation, I dumped every last purple wonder into my mouth and chewed with a pulpy mouthful of orgasmic bliss. He chuckled and scratched his onion tuft of a beard. Oh, I get that quite a bit. And then he winked at me. I had to admit it was true, though. Something about him. A yellow pony. A yellow pony. A merchant pony. Bottle cap. I suddenly blurted, "You're Bottle Cap's father?" And then I was wiping globs of purple off my lips. Swallow, Blackjack. Swallow. Then speak. Of course he was her father. He was Finders Keepers. The founder of the Finders. Heck, his name was painted right over Megamart. Guilty as charged, he replied amiably as he lay on his back, tapping his hooves together as he pushed back his floppy hat. I didn't know you were a stable pony, I said as I looked at his pip buck. I didn't even know there were any other stables that, well, survived.